Tell me why you decided to put on this hate crime for.
So we looked at kind of the history of hate in our country and in our region, and we looked at what happened in Pittsburgh recently. We have a Holocaust survivor, Joe Engel, right here in the city of Charleston. He actually recently presented to our command. We looked at just other events that have happened here, Mother Emanuel. We looked at last summer, we had an LGBTQ person, Kendra, who was assaulted violently. And we kind of brainstormed and said, what can we do? What more can we do to raise awareness about hate? And we all agreed a forum with some people who could speak with authority, like Joe Engel, who literally is a Holocaust survivor. And when you hear his story, it's so compelling and so powerful that something like that could actually happen in our country, in the history of this world, in other parts of the world, that there would be hate against other people just because of their race, because of their background, being Jewish, being LGBTQ. And so we started kind of brainstorming, and really a handful of us said, let's do a panel, let's have a discussion, and let's raise awareness. Let's talk about the facts. For me, as long as I've done this job, I'm always learning something new. And as a community, I think generally everybody would say hate has no home here. But unless you really talk about it and you kind of put it out there, we're not going to be as effective as maybe we could be.
Okay. As far as hate crime legislation goes, South Carolina is one of only a few states in the nation that doesn't have hate crime laws. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's something that needs to change. We need to have hate crime legislation. It helps in a variety of ways. One, for tracking. Two, I think it sends a message to our community that we're not going to tolerate hate, especially when it manifests itself in criminal outcomes like assaults and things like that. And it's something, I think it really sends a message. And it'll make us a safer and better community.
If someone gets into fisticuffs with someone else, they don't like that person, they get into a fight, they committed a crime, they've broken a law. If they do it because of that person's sexuality or race or what have you, why is that crime, why should that crime be labeled differently than the crime of assault?
It's a good question. I think a lot of people have that same question, good people. And I think the answer is so that we can better track and that we can understand better why certain crimes are being committed, and then we can address those more effectively within our community. That's what this panel is going to accomplish. We're going to have an education. Anybody who participates and listens to these stories will better understand. And I've never been African American. I've never been LGBTQ. I've never been Jewish. But I can tell you, having been to Israel, having sat down and listened to a lot of people and heard their stories and seeing firsthand there's hate in our communities. And there are people that have been targeted for all of those reasons, solely for those reasons. And so we as a community really have to have an awareness, a sense of a tracking and kind of a grasp of to what degree does that occur here. And to the degree that it does, we all need to rally around and have total clarity against hate as a community.
And you mentioned tracking. Why is tracking so important?
So if you were to ask me right now, how many hate-related events have we had in the city of Charleston? I could not tell you, because by definition, the only law that we've had up until a recent ordinance in our city was a very, very high-level statute on the federal side. And that would apply in something really extreme like Mother Emanuel. That was obviously a hate-based event. And so that would apply, but that's very rare, but it's very significant that it would reach to that level. So we don't have a state crime, and that's what you were saying earlier. We're really one of only 5, I think, in the nation. And actually just recently, I think Tennessee just passed a state law against hate, the track hate. And so it's something that we should have. I've experienced in other states, there's a better awareness. So to answer your question, we would actually be tracking. If you called and said, I was assaulted, or my house was vandalized, or I was struck, or whatever the case might be, and you said it was race-based, we would investigate it as such. We would look into that. When we would say, is there a problem? Is there something wrong in this particular community with this particular individual? Is there something systemic that we should be paying attention to? And as a community, I would hope that we'd be able to more effectively, one, track those types of events, and two, better deal with and address those things so that our community is safer, that we are able to eliminate those types of assaults and things like that, and more effectively have those conversations. Because if I was to ask somebody in the African American community, when we left the Holocaust Memorial after the Pittsburgh shooting, there was people in the Jewish community whose kids were afraid to go to school, who were being attacked online, who were being bullied. I had to escort people to their cars because they were afraid of being attacked because of their status of being Jewish. Now, to me, that's not right. To me, that's a conversation that we all should be a part of. To me, we all have to come together against hate and make sure that we do everything possible to have a safe community, to protect those people. I have a problem with bullies. I think we all should.
Does your department report hate crimes to the federal government?
Yes, however, again, that definition is so narrow to reach the federal threshold. There's very few of those things. Mother Emanuel would be one of them. There's been a couple of them in the last few years. The state definition would be a little bit broader. That's how it is in other states. If it was a similarly modeled legislation, it was written similarly, so that we would track a lot more things at the local level, not just the only select big events that happen like that.
The attack against the person at the club here in Charleston that you mentioned, would you specify that, label that as a hate crime?
Yes. So I think because of her gender identity, Kendra was attacked for that reason. And I think that was something that clearly we learned after reviewing video, after doing interviews, after talking to a whole host of different people. We learned that was why that happened, because of Kendra's looks, and it was very specific targeting.
The legislation on a city level, how is that going to play a difference? Does it have enough teeth to be meaningful?
We have the state, the local ordinance in the city of Charleston, which you're referencing. It's not enough. We really need a state ordinance. It's a good step, but there's a lot of limitations that the city has. And just the statewide tracking, we have some tracking, but if we create an ordinance at the state level, it'll have more impact, more effect, and more ability to track those things and prosecute when appropriate.
What are the limitations of the city ordinance?
Well, it's local. There's just like with guns. We've had some ordinances with guns and other things. It really is limited what the authority the city has. It's almost more of a message. It's more of a, it has some effect, but it's not as significant. There's limitations with a city ordinance.
Does it make, having that strong language, let's start with the city ordinance, does that make prosecution any easier?
Having a state ordinance?
We'll start with the city, having a city ordinance, does that make prosecuting it any easier? Then we'll move to having a state ordinance.
Now when you say prosecuting it, so you have a normal crime like an assault, and we can prosecute that now with or without this ordinance. Now we have an enhancement. You have to have that foundation of a crime like an assault already in place. You can't not have a victim, you can't not have that crime. But now, with that enhancement, with that being a definition, it's something that becomes a part of the investigation, a part of the report, and part of our tracking of that event.
Now, on the state level, same answer, or would it be more, somewhat different?
No, I'd say the same answer, except now the entire state is tracking these events. So it's not all a bunch of different municipalities doing their own thing. It's not a bunch of different cities within the state of South Carolina. It's a unified message from the governor's office, from the legislature, that this is important to the state of South Carolina. So when we prosecute, when we track, when we talk about what's going on in the state of South Carolina, how I would define success is a picture will emerge. And I hear from a lot of people, hey, there's a lot going on with hate. Nobody's talking about it. What if that's true, we'll have a little bit more evidence-based research, we'll have a little bit more data, we'll actually have specific examples that'll be tracked and codified that we can talk about and make sure that we have good strategies so that we have a culture of inclusiveness here within our state, that we're looking out for everybody.
Would you say that hate crimes are unusual? They don't seem to happen a lot.
You know what? I would say I don't see them a lot. I would say they're unusual. You could ask a lot of different people in different communities, like I've mentioned, the African American community, the LGBTQ community, the Jewish community, and they would give you a different answer than I'm giving you. So I think that's the challenge. We need to shine light on this. We need to find out what the truth is, what are the facts, what is the evidence, what is the challenge that we have, and go from there, not just based on what people think, or they might. What I think, frankly, doesn't matter that much if you've been assaulted because of one of those reasons, because of just simply who you are. Well, I think that's the challenge.